there, welcome to the Healing Migraines Naturally podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Leslie Caesar, and I am a licensed naturopathic doctor, former chronic migraine sufferer, and I have dedicated my life to helping other women with migraines rediscover a migraine-free life. So welcome to the podcast. Today I am going to cover a topic that was a request from a client of mine. She said, can you talk about intermittent fasting on the podcast? And I said, yeah, we haven't talked about that. That's a great topic. The question that women with migraines have is, should I do this intermittent fasting? Is it going to help my migraines? Most migraine sufferers are very sensitive to missing a meal, having a meal delayed, having their blood sugar drop. And so intermittent fasting has been something that's been talked about a lot. It's been kind of prominent, almost like a little fad that's been going on for the past few years. And a lot of people are promoting, the health benefits of it and so on. And so a lot of women with migraines are asking, should I do intermittent fasting? There's a lot of things that sound appealing about it, but gosh, I don't know. I'm a little worried that my migraines are going to get worse if I do that because I'm so sensitive to getting a migraine if I miss a meal or if I get hungry and I don't eat fast enough or my blood sugar drops. So this, I think, is a really great topic to talk through for migraine sufferers. Okay, so let's dive into this. I've been hearing about intermittent fasting for maybe 15 years. It's been around for a while, the concept. And a lot of things within nutrition, they kind of take old concepts and put a new name on it, right? So like with the keto diet, that used to be called the Atkins diet. It's really the same way of eating. It just has a new name, kind of a rebranding. So intermittent fasting, basically the concept is that you are limiting your sort of window when you are going to eat throughout the day. So the most common sort of setup or scenario with intermittent fasting is that people will only eat during an 8-hour window during the day. So they may only eat between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. or noon and 8 p.m. So that 8-hour window is a pretty common window. And so you're just like drinking water, or maybe you're having herbal tea or something like that outside of that window that you're going to eat in. A little bit more restrictive setup would be maybe you're only eating within a 6-hour window. So you're eating between maybe noon and 6 p.m. That's sort of the window in which you can consume food. And outside of that, again, you're drinking water or herbal tea or black coffee, something like that. So that's probably the most common setup for intermittent fasting. Maybe you could say a more challenging version of this would be that maybe you're eating during your regular cadence, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, Monday through Friday, but then on Saturday and Sunday, maybe you're only eating one meal on the weekends, that type of thing. So basically the overall concept is you are creating a narrower window in which you're going to consume food. So what do people that, again, tout intermittent fasting, what are some of the more, tangible benefits, right? So definitely people will report, oh yeah, I lost weight on intermittent fasting. Hi there, I want to jump in real quick and tell you about my client Beth. She was getting 15 to 20 migraines and headaches per month, and as you can imagine, this was impacting her work performance and her confidence. She also has 2 small children, and she was starting to feel like she was a horrible mom because she had nothing left for them at the end of the day. But she reached out and she booked a free consult call with me, and after I asked her about her migraines and her health history, I felt confident that I could help her. I help women uncover the root drivers of their migraines and follow a step-by-step plan to dramatically reduce the frequency by up to 90% without adding more medication or taking a bunch of supplements. So we built her personal migraine map, followed the plan, and now she will get 1 to 2 migraines per year, which she uses ibuprofen to treat if she needs to, versus up to 15 to 20 per month when we first started working together that weren't responding well to any medication. She just reached out to tell me that she got a promotion at work. She's on top of her career again and has been able to come off all of her migraine medication. But most importantly, she's a confident mom again, and she's attending birthday parties at Jump Zone with her kids and saying yes instead of saying maybe later. I've worked with women like Beth from all over the United States who were told, this is the best we can do, but they were still willing to dig deeper. So if you're serious about changing your migraine story, go to drlesliecaesar.com/apply or tap the link in the show notes, and on our free consult, we'll map out why your migraines keep coming back and the first 3 steps you can take over the next 30 days. I do cap new client spots each month, so if the calendar is full, the doors are closed for now. But if you're done feeling helpless and ready to do the work to heal, pause this episode for 30 seconds and book that consult call now. You know, sometimes people, when they do intermittent fasting, they might even only eat 1 meal per day. Okay, so generally, if you're eating within an 8 or especially a 6-hour window, you're only going to get 2 meals in per day. And then you can only eat so much at a meal, right? You might lose a couple pounds, right? But, you know, if you want to get to that 20 pounds, it's probably not going to be very effective. For some people, they will lose some weight on this. What I have seen too is people who are in a very good state of health and have a high level of physical fitness. So they already have a good amount of lean body mass, of muscle mass. They have a good physical fitness level, and they are in a good state of health. Some of the other benefits then that are touted outside of sort of weight loss and body composition is lowering inflammation. Okay, so I've talked about inflammation on the podcast before. This is a little bit of a soapbox topic for me. Inflammation, it's like this big buzzword, right? Inflammation. You got to lower inflammation. So just to kind of summarize what I've talked about in more depth before, inflammation is a necessary biochemical process that the body uses to get a ton of things done. Okay, so inflammation is not the bad guy. It's a necessary process within the body. And in fact, in order for anything to heal, you have to have inflammation for the healing process. So inflammation is not the problem. The problem is when inflammation can't finish the job, can't be resolved. So if our body doesn't have what it needs to heal, let's say we cut our skin, you know, chopping vegetables, and oops, I kind of cut my finger here doing that. When you get that clots and the skin starts to heal, you'll notice there's a red ring, there's a red margin around the cut on our finger, right? That's the inflammation. You have to have that inflammation in order for the skin to heal and repair itself. So you'll notice, like it's common with like elderly people, if they have a cut on their skin, it can take a long time to heal, and you'll notice it's not red. You're not seeing that red margin or ring around the cut because they don't have enough oomph to generate the necessary inflammation to heal that cut on their skin. So even chronic conditions within the body, right? Cutting your skin, cutting your finger is an acute injury. Chronic issues within the body come about because the body's trying to heal something, but it doesn't have what it needs to finish the job, so it keeps generating the inflammation. That's where chronic inflammation comes from, okay? Because our body doesn't have what it needs to finish the job of healing, and so it keeps trying. So when people say they want to lower inflammation, it's almost like we're trying to lower, I've got this bad stuff in my body and I'm trying to get it out, or I'm trying to lower this bad stuff that my body's producing. That's not really how we want to think about this, okay? One of my big missions is to help people realize that their body is not defective and broken and their body doesn't hate them. Their body is trying to do its best in the conditions in which it finds itself, okay? So if we don't have enough to finish the healing, we shouldn't be trying to shut down inflammation and stop inflammation. That stops the healing process. We should be looking at, okay, what is it that my body's missing so that it can finish this very important job of healing? So all of that said, people will use the term that intermittent fasting lowers inflammation. Why? What's going on here? Okay, so I wouldn't say that we have a definitive answer as to why intermittent fasting, quote unquote, lowers inflammation. But let me talk about, like, why would somebody say, oh, I feel like I don't have as much inflammation in my body? Someone would say that, they might say that, when they wake up in the morning, you wake up in the morning, oh, I'm stiff, right? Oh, I was like laying in bed and everything tightened up and stiffened up and my muscles are a little sore and my joints are stiff. And I got to walk around a little bit, squeeze, get my hands moving. My hands are tight, right? I got to get moving around, and then eventually everything kind of loosens up and now I'm not so tight, and right? It's like, oh, I'm inflamed in the morning. There's inflammation here, right? So someone doing intermittent fasting might wake up, oh, wow, I'm not so stiff. I'm not so tight, right? The inflammation is lower, right? So a lot of times this is what people are really talking about when they're talking about lowering inflammation, okay? Or they might have a rash. They might have a chronic rash, eczema, itchy rash, hives, something like that. And they might do intermittent fasting and their skin improves. Oh, inflammation was lowered, right? It must mean that inflammation is lowering. People might report more energy, less brain fog, they're thinking more clearly. Again, when people experience that type of improvement, a lot of times that will be described as inflammation is lower, that type of thing. So these are some of the things that people will report that they experience when they do intermittent fasting. Okay, some of these benefits, I would say those are some of the common benefits. Other people that, maybe type 2 diabetics, my fasting glucose is starting to go down. I did this for a while, my A1C is a little bit better, right? They might notice better blood sugar control. So why would this way of eating, limiting your food intake and only eating within, say, a 6 or 8 hour window, why would that, quote unquote, lower inflammation? Okay, so when we eat, our digestive tract gets to work, starts breaking the food down. Our digestive process is the major process that the body expends its energy on every day. When you ask people, what do you think your body spends its energy on? Most people would say, oh, my muscles, moving my muscles. That must be what my body spends most of its energy doing, moving me around. Or you might think, oh, my brain, I'm thinking all the time. Probably my body is spending a lot of energy making my brain work, right? So maybe it's my muscles, my brain. That's what most people assume is what the body spends most of its energy on. It's actually our digestive system, okay, is what our body spends most of its energy doing. It takes a tremendous amount of energy to break our food down. When we eat, we should be able to eat enough so that we can make it to the next meal. Okay, so we should have enough of an appetite and good enough digestive function that we can break down a full meal, and then we're going to go several hours until the next meal. And then we're going to be able to have enough of an appetite and good enough digestive function so that we can break that next meal down, and then we're going to be able to make it, we've eaten enough food that we can make it to the next meal, say our dinner. And again, we're going to be able to eat a full meal. We're going to have enough of an appetite to do that. We're going to be able to break that food down. And then I have an overnight fast, right? Because everybody is going to fast for about 8 hours a day anyway, by default, because you can't eat when you're sleeping, right? So after I eat that dinner, that last meal of the day, at some point, I'm not going to eat anymore. I'm going to go to sleep, and I'm going to have at least an 8 hour period of time where I'm not eating. So that is a de facto fast that's going to occur, a long fast that occurs every day. But in between, say my breakfast and my lunch and my dinner, I'm going to have a little mini fast. So those fasting periods are critical for our digestive tract, and most people are not aware of this. And in fact, most people have been given very poor advice, particularly migraine sufferers have been given very poor advice to disrupt this natural fasting cycle, okay? So the digestive tract, because it's working so hard, it needs periods of rest. And so the little mini fasts between our meals give a rest period for our digestive tract to recuperate and get ready. Okay, now I can tackle the next meal, right? And then that longer overnight fast, that gives an even longer time for the digestive tract to really rest and repair and reset and get ready for a whole new day. Those fasting periods are critical. Now, most people in this day and age, especially migraine sufferers, have been told to eat 5 to 6 mini meals, okay? It's like not a coincidence that all over the planet, in many different cultures, it's very typical where people are eating 3 meals, okay? And they're spread out. Different cultures have a little bit different, time frame, and some meals are a little bit bigger than others. But this is common across cultures that people eat like this. That's not a coincidence. But unfortunately, there's quite a bit of bad advice that goes around. And so people have been told for a long time now, for decades and decades, that if you want to lose weight, eat 5 to 6 small meals a day. Most migraine sufferers are so sensitive to missing a meal gets delayed, our blood sugar drops, I'm hungry, I better eat right away, I don't want to get a headache, right? We're very sensitive to that. So many neurologists have told their migraine patients, hey, I want you to eat 5 to 6 small meals per day so that you avoid any possibility of your blood sugar dropping, or, you can't miss a meal if you're eating every 3 hours, every 2 to 3 hours, right? So a lot of people are eating this way. And so this actually really burns out the digestive tract, okay? Because, again, we need these rest periods for the digestive tract to function well. And if you're kind of forcing the food in there 5-6 times a day, you eliminate those little mini fasts, okay? So a lot of people have eaten this way, kind of burned out their digestion. The digestive tract itself, in order to make, I'll just give you one example. In order to make hydrochloric acid in your stomach, you have to have inflammation to do that. This is what I'm saying. Inflammation is required to accomplish a whole host of things throughout the body requires inflammation to be generated. When you have a burned out digestive tract and you're not digesting your food very well, the undigested food particles sort of leak into your bloodstream. I've talked about this on other podcasts. This podcast is referencing a ton of other podcasts, so we will link them. And so when that happens, now you've got little protein molecules that your immune system says, what is this foreign protein? This isn't me. I better get rid of this, right? We got immune system activation. That generates inflammation. Your liver has to detoxify those little undigested food molecules. So now we're adding to the overall toxin load within the body, okay? All of this is not going to make you feel good, okay? Long story short, you're not going to feel well, okay? Over time, you're going to start to feel stiff muscles and joints, which is a textbook toxicity symptom, a symptom that the body generates when there's an overload of toxins and metabolic waste material. Your appetite, your overall digestive function is going to start to diminish, so people start having difficulty with bowel movements, or, now I have heartburn or gas or bloating or reflux or, whole host of problems, okay? And if you then sort of swing the pendulum in the opposite direction, right? Well, now I'm just going to eat in a 6-hour window, and now I'm going to have an 18-hour fast for my digestive tract to rest. Oh my goodness, this can have a tremendous impact on helping people's digestive tract start to re-regulate itself. If their state of health hasn't fallen too far out of balance, if they kind of catch it in time, it can be very helpful for people, okay, to sort of help their digestive tract repair itself. So when your digestive tract is functioning well and it's breaking the food down correctly and it's preventing undigested food particles from leaking into your bloodstream and causing these downstream issues, are you going to feel better? Of course you're going to feel better. Okay, so I think that a lot of the benefits that people report from intermittent fasting are due to these types of things. When I think about how the typical American has been told to eat and eats, and how the typical American's digestive function and what they struggle with and all of these things, to me this makes logical sense. Knowing the physiology of the body, etc., I think in that case, it can be beneficial for people and people will feel better. Brain fog, I mean, that's another toxicity symptom. A lot of these symptoms that people will talk about, getting better on intermittent fasting, a lot of them are like textbook metabolic waste material overload symptoms. They're kind of textbook toxicity symptoms. A lot of excess toxins and, what I call waste materials come into the body through the digestive tract if the digestive tract is not working well. All of that to say, right, there are some reasonable benefits that someone could get from doing intermittent fasting. Now, I say all of this, and remember I said if someone's health has not declined too much, okay? Because the downside to intermittent fasting is that you're reducing your food intake and therefore your nutrient intake. And this is what nobody talks about when they talk about intermittent fasting, okay? They're talking about like calorie intake, but they're not talking about nutrient intake. So if you've been listening to the podcast, I talk about the 3 things that our body needs in order to restore itself back to health and maintain its state of health. And the first thing our body needs is we have to get the nutrients that our cells need to our cells. Okay, so we should be getting those nutrients from the food that we're eating. So if we're eliminating food, if we're cutting back on food, we're cutting back on our nutrient intake. Now, for some Americans, maybe they're not eating that much nutrient-dense food to begin with, and then they put these guard rails on, they put a little bit of discipline around what they're eating, they start eating, more nutrient-dense foods. Okay, I'm eating less meals, but I'm actually getting more nutrients in. It's possible. But you really have to, if you're going to just eat twice a day, because you can only eat so much during a meal, there's a limit, there's a quantity limit that your, digestive tract can handle. You really have to be very careful that if you're going to do that, you're structuring what you're eating in a way that you're going to get, enough nutrients in. So this, I think, is going to be one of the biggest problems with intermittent fasting for someone who is not in a very good state of health. And here's the reality: if you're struggling with headaches and migraines, you are not in a very good state of health. I know your doctor has told you, oh, you're healthy, your lab work looks great, right? By the time we get headaches and migraines, our health has declined to, I hate to tell you, a fairly considerable degree, okay? There are other symptoms that start to pop up that are more like early warning symptoms that just start to pop up sort of right at the beginning when we start to fall out of a state of health. Migraines come on later. This is the number one thing that migraine sufferers don't understand, because we get concerned about the migraines. When I first started getting migraines, I was like, make these go away, right? What happened? How did this happen? To me, it seemed out of the blue. But then once I understood, okay, actually, my health started to decline by the time I was like 14 years old, right? I was already experiencing some of these early warning symptoms by the time I was in high school, but nobody recognized that, nobody understood that, because we just don't, unfortunately, in our culture. And so then when I started getting migraines in my early to mid 20s, it's like, how'd this happen? Where did this come from? It's out of the blue. But when I really understood things, it was like, no, this was brewing for 10 years. Hi there. I want to jump in real quick and tell you about my client Beth. She was getting 15 to 20 migraines and headaches per month. And as you can imagine, this was impacting her work performance and her confidence. She also has 2 small children, and she was starting to feel like she was a horrible mom because she had nothing left for them at the end of the day. But she reached out and she booked a free consult call with me, and after I asked her about her migraines and her health history, I felt confident that I could help her. I help women uncover the root drivers of their migraines and follow a step-by-step plan to dramatically reduce the frequency by up to 90% without adding more medication or taking a bunch of supplements. So we built her personal migraine map, followed the plan, and now she will get 1 to 2 migraines per year, which she uses ibuprofen to treat if she needs to, versus up to 15 to 20 per month when we first started working together that weren't responding well to any medication. She just reached out to tell me that she got a promotion at work, she's on top of her career again, and has been able to come off all of her migraine medication. But most importantly, she's a confident mom again, and she's attending birthday parties at Jump Zone with her kids and saying yes instead of saying maybe later. I've worked with women like Beth from all over the United States who were told, this is the best we can do, but they were still willing to dig deeper. So if you're serious about changing your migraine story, go to drlesliecaesar.com/apply or tap the link in the show notes. And on our free consult, we'll map out why your migraines keep coming back and the first 3 steps you can take over the next 30 days. I do cap new client spots each month, so if the calendar is full, the doors are closed for now. But if you're done feeling helpless and ready to do the work to heal, pause this episode for 30 seconds and book that consult call now. Migraines are something that brews for a while we're experiencing more of these early warning symptoms. Okay. Specifically now, if you're struggling with migraines, right? And now I'm going to cut back on the nutrients that I'm eating. This is not going to be good in the long term because the fact that we're getting migraines indicates that there's something that's blocking the delivery of the nutrients that our cells need to our cells, okay? And usually there are a whole host of factors and blockers, but the first blocker is going to be if I'm not eating enough nutrients. That's really going to block the ability for my cells to get the nutrients they need if I'm just not eating the nutrients, right? So when we have migraines, we want to work on being able to eat enough food to meet our basic energy needs and our nutrient needs, okay? And so most women with migraines, not all, but most, are having digestive symptoms. It's clear when we do their assessment that their digestive tract is not functioning properly and is struggling to break the food that they are eating down and get the nutrients out of the food. And I've talked about how this impacts our appetite. So most women with migraines, not all, but most actually have low appetite because their body is trying to protect their digestive tract. It's like, well, if I can't break this food down because I'm struggling, I don't want you to put a whole bunch in here. And so their appetite decreases and they're not able to eat a full meal anyway. They think they are, but they aren't able to. So in that whole scenario, right, the most common situation that a woman with chronic migraines and headaches finds herself in, and then reads an article about intermittent fasting or listens to a podcast about it, and it's talking about, lowering inflammation and everything. Well, migraines, that must be related to inflammation, right? And I certainly do wake up feeling stiff and, brain fog, the whole bit. Let me give this a try. Now I'm further diminishing my nutrient intake because I'm eating even less food, okay? So this is not going to be good in the long term. There might be a temporary sort of improvement in some symptoms because instead of, doing what her neurologist told her, which is eat 5 to 6 times, per day, small mini meals per day, or women with low appetite and poor digestive function, because they can't eat a full meal, they kind of go into that pattern on their own anyway because they can't, they get full too quickly, so they can't eat a full meal. They can just eat a mini meal before they get so full, and they say, okay, that's enough, I guess. But it's not enough food so that they can make it to the next meal. So they're getting hungry, 2.5 hours later, they got to eat again, right? So they're already eating multiple times a day. Unfortunately, that further disturbs and burns out their digestive tract. So in that type of environment, suddenly you make this big change where you're giving this big rest period to your digestive tract. You might feel a little bit better in the short term, but in the long term, it's not going to serve you because you're further diminishing your nutrient intake. And just if the digestive function gets that poor, just increasing that rest period, it's not going to be the answer. Okay, you need more support and more interventions in order for the digestive tract to turn around quickly. So it's not the best solution. Okay, you might get, like I say, a temporary lift, but in the long term, it's going to further deplete your body from nutrients. It's not going to have that big of an impact on your digestive tract. So that's a real negative for women with chronic migraines. Okay, you're putting another blocker in front of what I call that first principle, which is ultimately getting the nutrients to your cells. We want to eliminate blockers. We don't want to add blockers. So the other, big kind of glaring thing for women with headaches and migraines is, like I said in the beginning, most of us are very sensitive to getting a headache or a full-blown migraine if our blood sugar drops, if we miss a meal, if a meal is delayed, if we skip a meal, right? This is really common. It's kind of notorious amongst migraine sufferers. In fact, many of us, right, we don't leave the house without food. I mean, by the time I was 14, I couldn't make it to lunch in school without having a snack. I had to sneak crackers and so on in my purse at school because I'm a Gen Xer. When I was in high school, nobody could eat during the school day. Now, right, they allow the kids to eat all the time throughout the school day. But when I was in high school, you couldn't, that was against the rules. You couldn't eat anything. So I had to sneak these crackers and so on in my purse. I used to, as a young adult, I wouldn't leave my house without some sort of food in my purse. I was very, very sensitive to missing a meal. Oh, pretty much guaranteed migraine, right? So a lot of migraine sufferers are in that boat, right? We don't leave the house without snacks. So then you say, well, you're telling me I'm going to feel better if I miss a meal, if I don't eat when I feel hungry, right? What if I feel hungry before my window opens up in the morning and then I don't eat? A lot of migraine sufferers, they're definitely going to get a headache, if not a full-blown migraine, if they don't eat when they feel hungry, right? So from that perspective, intermittent fasting is probably not going to be a good fit for you if you're struggling with headaches and migraines, and you're particularly sensitive to missing a meal or having your blood sugar drop. In fact, most articles that you'll read on intermittent fasting, before I jumped on here, I just did a little review of some of the articles, on the Johns Hopkins website. They talk about intermittent fasting. That's sort of how mainstream this has gotten. And they talk about, during the adaptation period, right? So when you first start doing it, are you going to feel bad? Yeah, you definitely could. And one of the things that you may get are headaches, right? So even people who are not prone to headaches, when they start something like intermittent fasting, you can get headaches. So for a migraine sufferer, this is probably not something that you're too interested in trying out, right? And so a lot of times when people reach out to me, they're concerned, okay, are you going to have me do intermittent fasting because I've read so much about it and everybody's talking about how great it is. And, Dr. Leslie, I know I can't miss a meal. I know, I've got to eat something in the morning or I'm, going to die by 10:30. So, I'm not recommending these types of things at all to my clients, right? We're working on one, because for so many of my clients, their digestive function is poor and their appetite is low. That's the first thing that we have to work on, because again, nothing in the body is going to work right. We're never going to feel well if we don't have the nutrients that we need to function properly, and that has to come, it should come, from the food that we're eating and proper digestion, right? Efficient and proper digestion, extraction of those nutrients out of the food. Our digestive tract is not designed to get nutrients out of capsules and things like that. It's designed to get nutrients out of food. And so that's really what we should be relying on, right? It's great that we have the technology now that we can put some nutrients in capsules. And then if somebody really has a significant deficiency, we can improve the digestive function, make sure their digestive tract can handle high dose isolated nutrient supplements. This is another thing that a lot of natural practitioners don't realize. If you have poor digestive function and then you're taking like high dose isolated nutrients, you can really throw off your digestive tract. So, even to take a nutrient capsule of some nutrient that someone is, particularly deficient in, a lot of times we've got to get the digestive tract up and running to handle that, and got to make sure, like, first you got to be able to eat food, then we can talk about, like, if we need to do some specific nutrient supplementation to correct, like, big deficiencies. So, intermittent fasting, right? Number one, even John Hopkins says you could highly likely get headaches if you do this in the first week or two, even if you're not prone to headaches. Okay, so that's a pretty big turnoff for migraine sufferers. Like I say, it's going to be counterproductive to you restoring your health, which is really what we want, right? We want to restore our health so that our body stops generating the headaches and the migraines in the first place. And so limiting your nutrient intake is going to be counterproductive to that. And so I have had clients where they have done intermittent fasting and, they did feel better for a period of time, but then, right? Oh, no, right? I'm not feeling so good anymore. The other really big downside to intermittent fasting is it's not sustainable, okay? Maybe we want to meet a friend for breakfast and, sit in a little cafe and have an omelet and a cup of coffee and talk about the latest Netflix special with a friend, right? And so now that is going to be outside of your intermittent fasting window, so you can't do that, right? That's not too fun, right? Maybe we want to go on a trip. We want to visit relatives. We're going to stay with our relative, and they're like, hey, I'd love to make you breakfast in the morning. What would you like? Oh, I can't eat breakfast, right? We don't want to be that person. Somebody's trying to be hospitable and host and have the satisfaction of all of that, the satisfaction of kind of taking care of us, and then we have to decline. Nobody wants that. It's not sustainable, right? Like I say, again, I think the best outcome for people are people that are already in a good state of health. They have a high physical fitness level. They want to just kind of improve their body composition. They want to lose a little bit of fat, right? Get their lean body mass percentage up. I think those are the best use case for intermittent fasting. And you just do it for a short period of time, right? If you ate like this for 2 weeks, you may be limiting your nutrient intake a little bit, but your body it's already running well. It can survive for 2 weeks, right? So it's like a short-term little intervention for a specific person, for a specific reason, for people that are already doing very well. It's really not appropriate for people that are in a diminished state of health and experiencing significant symptoms. And then number three, nobody wants to live like this. It's not sustainable long term, okay? But we want to be able to accomplish, right? I'm so grateful, right? Because I'm always thinking about you guys, because I know what it's like to have a horrible migraine. I know what it's like to have anxiety that, oh my goodness, I'm going to go do this thing and it might give me a migraine, and then what am I going to do? And oh my God, I totally get it. I have gone through all of that. And so this whole trip, the whole time I was thinking about you guys, like, wow, right? All of these things that were stressors, and my body, I needed a lot of resiliency and vitality to weather all of those stressors, right? And, it was a lot of physical stressors, like the travel, the time change, the change in routine, the temperature changes to the sun, all of changes to the sun exposure. All of those things are physical stressors. But then there were a lot of emotional stressors too. you're going to a wedding, you don't know everybody, right? You get a little nervous. Fortunately, my uncle passed away a few years ago, and so I knew that it was going to be really emotional for my cousins, for my aunt, even for me, but certainly for my uncle's children and his wife, right? So, all of those things, there were some mental and emotional stressors that we were exposed to. And then, even a joyous occasion like a wedding, right? It's a heightened emotional state that also is, an emotional stressor too. Even like good emotions or, pleasant emotions are still stressful. So all of these things, right? This is how we want to be able to live, right? We want to be able to get on a plane and go to a wedding and see our family and, cry a little bit with the cousins for grief and for joy. All of these things are the human experience that we want to have, and we don't want to have to micromanage everything, right? Okay, well, do I have my sunglasses? Do I have my snacks? Is it my eating window or not, right? We just want to be able to let go and experience these things and kind of go on the fly. When we went up to Sedona, we were thinking about doing a Jeep tour. Those were booked. We ended up doing a helicopter tour, right? It's like, boom, boom, boom. What are we going to do? Yeah, I can do it, right? I know that I can go with the flow and we can make, minute by minute decisions as to what we're going to do. And I know now that I'm going to be okay. And it's wonderful. And I want that for all of you too. That's the number one thing that I wish for all of the women listening to this podcast, because it's possible. And it doesn't require all of this micromanagement, all of this sort of restrictive eating, etc. Now, I'm on a day-to-day basis, right? I'm eating in a health-supporting way most of the time. Nobody's perfect, right? But of course, I'm putting a priority on healthy eating, getting enough nutrients in with my meals, etc. But that allows me to have a week like I had where it was a little bit, we went to In-N-Out Burger, like a little bit off the out of the norm, and little fast food here and there, a little fast casual, definitely different schedule, etc. And even some treat foods. At the reception, they have one of those big donut walls, right, where they have the big walls with the pegs, and then it was all donuts. So definitely my cousin and I, we got some donuts at the reception, and etc. So you want to be able to enjoy those things, right? So if you're trying to get rid of your migraines by cutting everything out, never eating a donut, never eating at a restaurant, what's in the sauce? Can you hold all of this, right? It's not the answer, and it's not how any of us want to live, and it's not necessary. This is the thing. What we want to focus on is restoring our health, restoring our resiliency and vitality, so that we can weather all of these things, and we can have a week where we have some treat foods and some things that are out of the norm, and still feel good. That's what we really want. So you're going to have a tough time. Like I say, you're going to have a tough time living like that if you have a narrow window of time that you can eat in. And like I say, it's not necessary. It's not necessary. So I hope this was helpful to do this deep dive into intermittent fasting. So again, if you're afraid that, because a lot of migraine sufferers, they feel stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? I know I need to make some changes to feel better, but can I can't make extreme changes. What is going to be required here? Is it going to be something crazy? Is it going to be extreme? That's not how we get back to health, right? Health is bringing things back into balance and kind of bringing things back to the middle, not going from extreme to extreme. And that's unfortunately what a lot of these kind of dietary fads do. They kind of pull people from one extreme to another. We were in the vegan phase, and now we're in the carnivore phase, right? Everything is like this pendulum making these massive swings, right? So we're going from telling people to eat 5 to 6 times a day, and now we're telling them to eat, one meal a day or just in a 6-hour window, right? It's like these big swings, and that's not really what health is. Health is bringing things back into balance, bringing that pendulum more in the middle. And then if we choose to make a big swing by, making a big jump from 32 degrees to 100 degrees to enjoy a nice week with family, we can do that. Okay, so that's really what we should be shooting for. So thanks so much for joining me today. I hope this gave you a lot of good information and also gave you a little bit of inspiration that, to restore your health, you don't have to do a lot of extreme things. And especially when you suffer from migraines, right? If you do something too extreme, you could get a migraine. But really, the ultimate goal here is to restore our resiliency and vitality so that we don't have to bubble wrap ourselves and we can enjoy spontaneous things or things that we know are going to be inherently stressful, but we can sail through. So thanks so much for joining me. If you're enjoying the content on the channel, please like, subscribe, give us a comment. It really does help us with the algorithms. And then if you're subscribed, you're going to get notifications when we have new episodes each week. So thanks for joining me today, and don't hesitate to reach out. Be happy to talk with you on a free consult call. You can book that there's a link in the comments where you can get on my calendar and we can talk through what's going on with your migraines. And if I think I can help you, I will tell you. If I think that I can't help you, I will tell you that too, and try to point you into something that's going to be the best fit for you. So thanks again for joining me, and I will talk to you soon.